Hey guys, this is Chris with the UA Lab. Today I wanted to bring to you guys the Nikke decks. We have this set coming up soon. It has some pretty cool decks. Definitely some interesting play styles, though the impact this set is going to have on the meta is still to be determined for us. We have such a different meta from when this set released in Japan, especially with sets like Kenshin or the upcoming Ava sets. And so there's some really cool things we can look at here, but definitely holding my breath on what this set itself will do as a whole in our current meta. With that being said, I will admit I haven't had the time to really deep dive into each of these and see how they play with everything yet. But I definitely wanted to bring to you guys some of the decks I think are interesting or that I think will have a better chance, playing into our meta. To start with that, we're actually going to start with the green deck. This is the one I have the least familiarity with, but it's definitely an interesting one. So this one is the green Missilis deck. This is one that's going to focus mostly on having 4,000 beaters on the front line. You can see we have a plethora of cards that are 4,000 or that are able to get to 4,000. Ways we can do that are we have the one cost Laplace. She's able to just on your turn she gains 1,000. If you have another 4,000 on field that's straight Missilis. That's easy to stack with other stuff to get her up to 4,000 herself, or simply just being a 3K beater. There's nothing wrong with having a card up front that's 3K. I think that's been shown pretty frequently with recent lists where, say Kenshin for example, Red Kenshin, being able to just throw up a 3K, even in this case the zero cost, right? Zero cost comes out and it's just a menace. It's early to get out. It's easy to just start swinging with, and in this case the Laplace does have step, meaning you can throw her out early, pull her back when you need the energy, or whatever you need to make the most use of her ability. Next for pumping up cards is we have Liter. Forgive me if I mispronounce some of the names here, but she gives us search. We can search for the top 3 cards, add any trait Missilis, and then of course discard a card. Your standard search, but with 3, that search does tend to vary from set to set. And then her main effect is you can just rest her and give something 1,000 BPs. So right there with these two, you can easily get a 4,000, or in this case, 2 4,000s on board, or put something else to 4,000 to make it so Laplace is now active to make her 3,000. And then, of course, leader is our color trigger. Green's color trigger is always iffy. It all depends on how much you have in hand. It's one of those that comes up. When it does come up, it comes up and can be big. But there's those other times where it's just rough to use. And in this case, for this deck, we're using Soda, Leader, Laplace, Pepper, Alice, and the zero cost Laplace. So we have a handful of targets to hit with it. But with a lot of green decks, you kind of want to have the big stuff in hand so you can get big, assuming you've already set up. So green color trigger is always iffy, but definitely, I think leader has a fairly strong effect that makes her one to still include, regardless of the efficacy of the color trigger. Next, we have for pump, we've got Guilty here. She's naturally 3,000, but she says similar to the one cost Laplace. If you have a trait Missilis with 4,000 BP or more, she just gains 1,000. So she makes herself a 4,000, but she also generates 2 energy, which is going to be useful in this. It is a green deck. A lot of green decks do want to get a bit of energy on field. This is a deck that we're mostly aiming for about 5. We don't really need to go beyond that, but having a handful of cards that can get you to 5 is definitely going to be important. Other cards that pump here, we have the Maxwell. Maxwell is able to just target one other card and give it 3,000. Then, if there's 2 or more other trait Missilis on the field on the front line, she's able to untap. So she's a 4/2. 2 AP cards are always tricky. In some cases, a lot of cases they come in active themselves. But in her case, she's able to just pump something up and push herself or make herself active. Important to keep in mind, her effect is specifically if there are two or more other trait Missilis, so she will not count for this effect. So ideally, you'll have at least one 4,000 on field, another card up front, play Maxwell, pump the other card, so now you have two 4,000s. Maxwell will untap. So great for some early aggro, trying to just, keep 4,000 on board, get your opponent down. Definitely worth. Right now, this list is only running two. I will also say up front, this is a list that we're pulling from Torii cards. I haven't had the chance to really make any adjustments to it, but I did look through it and felt that this was a solid enough list as is. But there's definitely some stuff you can do to play around with it. As I said, there is energy requirement here, so we do have, like I said, the Guilty, and we have Julia here, who is another two energy generator. She also has the effect of whenever she attacks and it's not blocked, draw a card. So if you're able to get her to that 4,000 point, whether it's through a leader or a Maxwell or whatever else you're using to get her up there, you should actually be able to get that draw engine going pretty often. And I'd say this deck has a pretty decent amount of search. One, you've got the leader, you've got the draw from Julia. We'll actually talk about Alice here. She's one of the raids we're running. This is one where right now we're only running the zero cost Alice for the names. I think you could look at running some more Alice here. She does have a couple other cards we can work with. This card in particular allows us to pump something up for 1,000, or sorry, pump herself up for 1,000, as well as place a card from under her to the sideline. So you're not really gonna get this effect as often unless you play into the other style of green, the Tetraline side of it. That side of green is all about getting cards underneath, kind of like Yu Yu Hakusho with the green there, getting cards underneath and being able to use those to trigger stronger effects. But 4-cost Alice here is still really strong. She's look at the top 4 of your deck and play any one character with required energy cost of 2 or less and AP 1 from your into anywhere onto your field rested. The second half of her effect really isn't ever going to come up in this build of the deck. We're mostly using her to help us ramp out or hit names if we need for a raid, or even just have something on field that we can pump up to meet the 4,000 requirement, even if they can't attack that turn. But the remainder of her effect is you can place 2 cards from underneath cards in your field. Any character in your field, if it has a card underneath it, you can place up to 2 into your sideline. If you do, you're able to up the amount of the energy cost up to 3. So now you're able to theoretically play out something like a Guilty or a Julia if you were playing into that effect. Again, this build isn't really playing into that. You're mostly using Alice just for that 2-cost searcher, which still is not bad. And of course, she's a 4,000 and a raid. She'll come up no matter what, simply by being a 4,000 beater. With that, kind of with what we're looking at, you can kind of see how everything builds up into this, getting into 4,000s. To cover the last big 4,000 we have, we've got Drake here before the final raid. She says, when attacking, if there's 2 or more trait Missilis with 4,000 or more BP on your front line, you can look at the top 3 cards of your deck, place any number of them on the top or bottom. You can scry 3 cards if there's 2 or more 4,000 on the front line. And so, I mean, like I said, you've got a decent amount of search. Setup is always useful. Being able to scry, to use the magic term, is generally pretty helpful. You're able to filter out cards you don't need. Say you're already set up, you're able to now get out get rid of a 0 cost that you don't need, or maybe find a 0 cost you need to raid, to then get that next turn. Or if you have something else that draws, get it earlier. Definitely a strong effect, and I mean, again, it's a 4,000. Additionally, you have quite a few active triggers in this deck, so that's definitely helpful. The build up for all of this is we have the Laplace Raid. She is 5 cost, so again, that's why we need some cards that generate extra energy. And with her, she says if there's 2 or more other trait Missilis characters, 4,000 or more on your front line, she gains damage 2. Damage 2, I personally think is an incredibly strong effect in Union Arena. It's effectively just removal. Anytime you have damage 2, people are going to be quick to try and block, meaning that you are killing something, assuming it's not bigger. You know, that's always a consideration, like against Lancelot or Yu Yu Hakusho or Kurapika. Any of those decks that run 5,000s, those are always a concern. But again, you already have so much stuff in this deck that pumps that you're able to get up to that 5,000 or higher if you need to. So in this case, damage 2 is massive. It really just, you're either hitting for 2 damage or killing something. So pretty much every turn, it's a threat that needs to be dealt with. Her on play, it basically makes her like the the set raid Kenshin, the double attacker. Or sorry, no, starter deck Kenshin. She's able to push something back, but instead of having impact, she has damage 2. So definitely able to remove anything that's problematic and be able to swing in with damage 2. I feel that given the amount of 4Ks you're running with this deck, the fact that that's literally the whole goal of the deck, and then on top of that having a damage 2 character, you should be able to rip through people pretty quick. It all just comes down to how fast the deck is able to set up and be able to function, and of course how much control your opponent has. If your opponent is a heavy control deck, like say Mustang, you might struggle a bit because you are not able to keep enough cards on frontline that meet the 4,000 requirement to really make a difference. Final cards to go over real quick. Of course, our 0 cost, we have the Laplace with the get trigger, our Alice with the get trigger, Pepper, who is our looter, so she draw 1, discard 1. Definitely, if I can include one of these in a deck, I generally will. Unless there's just enough draw power outside of it that you don't need it. Then we have Soda here. She's just your standard when she's active, generate 2, giving us a total of 8 cards that generate 2 energy to make sure we're hitting that 5 cost. Pretty standard stuff. We want to hit the 5, have at least 8, 6 to 8, I'd say, energy generators to make sure you're hitting it. Then, of course, we have our final, pretty standard. I mean, untap 2 AP, always useful. And then our special. This special here is choosing a character with 2,000 or less and sideline it. Or if Laplace, then it's 5,000 instead. Then if there's 5 or more character cards with different names in your area, choose up to 1 character in your field and give it 1,000. So your standard removal, except for it's 2,000 to start instead of 5,000. But you're able to pump up as well, which kind of makes sense of why it gives us that lower threshold of 2,000 rather than 3 that we normally expect. So this is the green deck. Again, there is another style of green to play that is more that Tetra line, which is placing cards underneath in order to get extra effects. But personally, this particular deck plays more into a style that I find more enjoyable, as well as I think this damage 2 on Laplace is a massive bonus. So next, let's move over to purple. I actually have 2 purple decks that I'm going to go over here today. I think both are really interesting, but I think this first one is probably the one we'll see most often played. So this is the kind of anti-trigger purple deck. Its goal is we want to have as few cards with trigger on our field as we can, and then your opponent having triggers cards on their field. If you are not sure what a trigger is, if you're new to the game, if you look underneath a card, you will see that there's a trigger box. In this case, this card does not have a trigger box, whereas this card does. So any card that does not have a trigger box in your deck is normally a detriment to your deck. Most decks usually aim for about 40 cards with trigger effects. And then this one instead says, hey, I want to run as few as possible. I do not want cards with triggers. So the way that kind of works here is you have cards like Haran, this Haran, the raid, that says, hey, if you have 4 more cards without trigger, she just gains impact 1. Um, Other cards you have to work with are the sight. The sight here is actually super, super important to the deck. The sight as well as the color trigger Dorothy. So, where this deck runs few triggers, these 2 cards are basically your way of helping to get a trigger effect still, despite not having a normal trigger. So the way that works is Eden here says, first, if there's 3 or more cards without trigger on your field, reduce the energy card cost requirement of the card by 3. That's really easy. Basically, by standard way of play, by the time that you are playing out a 3-cost card, in this deck you'll have 3 cards without triggers, meaning this card is effectively a 3-cost. But the important effect of it is during your opponent's turn, when a card without trigger is placed from your life to your sideline, you can rest this card. This is a hard once per turn. You can only activate this card once per turn. So if you have multiple copies on field, you can only activate 1. But if you do rest it, you can take one of the cards that was hit in life and add it back to your hand. So if you're hit with the damage 2, you can pick and choose one of those cards and take it back to life. Or say they hit you with damage 2 and one of them is a color or special or whatever. It's a card with a trigger. You can activate that trigger and then you can still tap Eden here in order to get that other card back that doesn't have a trigger. So Eden is super, super important. It effectively makes any of our non-trigger cards into get triggers. Dorothy, on the other hand, the color Dorothy, says on your opponent's turn while she's in front line, if a card without trigger is placed from your life to the sideline, you can just draw a card. You don't have to rest her or anything, but again, she is a hard once per turn. So you cannot have multiple copies of Dorothy on field and get that effect multiple times. Kind of a bummer. I feel like the deck could actually use that a bit more, since especially with current meta, with say how fast Kenshin is, or even the Saito deck. Or even, you even go for an older deck and say something like Lancelot, where Lancelot's able to just clear board and hit really hard. Dorothy kind of falls flat at that point because you are only, if she's alive after the Lancelot hits, you're only drawing 1 card off of it. Now, I mean, theoretically, if that's all you're getting hit with, you're able to draw a card off of Dorothy and get take a get trigger with Eden. So like it's strong in how much you can actually draw and get from your deck, but it does come with a caveat of they're hard once per turns. So you are oftentimes going to be struggling a little bit because you just don't have the trigger effects to basically play back against your opponent. You don't have active triggers to help you block. You don't have your draw triggers or your get triggers, which you effectively are getting with the Dorothy and the Eden, but it can be a rough spot. Other cards we're looking with, we have some search. So Cecil here, she's able to just add a field card, so she can add your Eden off the top 7. The 0-cost Dorothy, again, of course, doesn't have a get trigger, which is rough because she is our raid. But she does just have, if you have no trigger, she's a 25. 2,500 on a 0 body is pretty strong. I think the only thing bigger than that is probably the 0-cost Kenshin that has the non-step 0-cost. Impact Negate, this is a card I think can be fitted with anything else. There is a handful of cards we can run that are 0-cost that might come in here. But again, the important thing is we're looking at is having 0 triggers, or as few triggers as possible. And Impact Negate does come up. So definitely not a bad card to run, just maybe a little bit rough given the circumstances of the deck. We have her on here. She is your 1-drop, draw 1, discard 1. Again, like I said, fantastic ability. Definitely one, helps with hand filtering, gets you further into your deck to get you the cards you need. Definitely a type of card that I think is probably going to be run in most decks that have them, if it's available. Again, your standard energy 2, generator 2, if she's active, generate 2. We are aiming for a 5-cost deck here. We want to have we want to have 5 to be able to go into both either Gurren or Dorothy. We have the 3-cost Haran. She actually is lets you ramp out really quick. You can play any card without trigger that's energy cost 2 or less from your hand to your field rested. So I mean that's really anything below her here. So you can play the Isabel, the Haran, or any of your 0 costs. Definitely, it's a great way to ramp out and get you to have more on field to deal with things, especially if you're like, hey, I need impact negate. Just toss out a Noah. We've got the 3-cost Dorothy. She says if there's 4 more cards without trigger in your area, she gains 1,000 BP, making her an easy 4,000 on a 3-cost body. And when attacking, if there are 2 or more cards with trigger on your opponent's field, choose one other character in your field that gains 500. A little unfortunate that's only 500. I think 1,000 would have been better here. But given when this set originally came out in Japan, I think a lot of these effects make sense for kind of where they were aiming. But definitely, hey, I can get over stuff. I can deal with things. Some of your lower stuff is able to become 3,000. It definitely has its place, and it is useful, but it is reliant on your opponent having cards with trigger. So if your opponent is just like, hey, you know what? If it's a mirror match, or if your opponent just says, hey, I'm just going to throw out cards that don't have trigger on field or on them onto my front line, well, I guess onto the field. It's at 2 or more. So it's a hard thing for most decks to be at. So this card should be live most of the time. But it is still reliant on your opponent to actually have that effect. We already went over the color trigger Dorothy. Again, she is fantastic. She is reliable. The deck is reliant on her effect. It's one you want to get the color Dorothy onto field quickly, so you can just start racking up the card draw so you can keep playing and not be at a disadvantage compared to everybody else. We have the Raid Haran. Kind of went over this a bit before, so if you have 4 more cards without trigger on your field, she gains Impact 1. I mean, Impact, fantastic. Love to see it. Definitely, most decks have it, but, it's one that, if you can get it, the more you can get of it, I think generally the better. Then she has, when attacking, look at the top 2 of your deck, reveal 1 with trigger, and add it to your hand, and put the other on the bottom. On the top or bottom. Top of deck, I'm bad. Put it on the top of the deck. So definitely solid there. I mean, you are able to effectively draw whenever you swing. Not the hand filtering of, say, scrying or whatever, to be able to put a card on the bottom to say, hey, I just don't want this card, but you do the card on top, so it does come in handy. You can definitely make use of it, though it is when attacking. So there is a bit of a rough spot there where it's like, hey, I just don't get the card I need until next turn, whereas maybe one of them is a special, and you would have loved to have had a special. It goes onto the top of your deck in that case because it has a trigger. But otherwise, he's like, you get a card in hand. It's not bad. The main thing here is she's a 4,000 with impact that does dig through your deck. Our big capstone of the deck, our main focus here, is going to be Raid Dorothy. She's on play if there are 4 more cards without trigger in your field. Choose one character in your opponent's front line with BP equal to or less than the number of cards in your opponent's field with trigger effects times 1,000 and retire it. So again, this is an effect that can be insanely strong because you can just straight up kill a 4,000 on play, but it requires your opponent to have a board and have a board with trigger effects. So in a lot of cases, most decks, I think people are building to have as many triggers as possible because the more triggers you have, the more consistent your deck can often be. So Dorothy is able to just straight up kill something. But it does mean that, hey, in some cases, if your opponent only has a 4K on board and nothing else on front line, then Dorothy is a raid that just, her raid effect is effectively not usable because you're going to raid into it and it's just not going to do anything. If it counted backline as well, I think Dorothy would be really strong, better. She is really strong, but again, there's going to be times where you're going to raid Dorothy and it's just not going to kill anything because your opponent just does not have enough on the front line to get up to the amount you need to kill. Final card that we're looking at. This is actually one we're going to be seeing twice here. Gurren, she is a 5/2, so 2 AP. Kind of like I said earlier, she is one that actually plays herself active. And then she has the fun effect of during the main once per turn, you can discard up to 3 cards. And this is a single instance, so you can't discard one, decide, and then discard another. It's a single instance, discard up to 3 cards, and then get get the following effects based on the number of cards discarded. One or more, she gets when attacking. You can draw 1 card. Two or more, she gains 1,000, so she's a 5K. And three, she actually gets double attack. So with discarding 3, she becomes a 5,000 double attacker that draws a card on each attack. So super strong effect, kind of similar in a way to the blue raid Ichigo. When you discard Getsuga Jujisho for his effect. So super cool. I mean, you are able to swing twice and refill your hand to a degree. Definitely a cool card. She's more of a kill card in this build. One that I think is fun to use, but really you're hoping to clear out your opponent's board with what you have and then use her for the kill. Other standard stuff, we have the 4 finals, we have the 4 specials. This is your very, very standard special. Kill a 3K or less, or if Dorothy's on field, 5K or less. And then, again, we have the Eden field. So, again, I think this deck is really cool. I think it's really interesting in how it plays. I worry that with the aggressive nature of decks like the red Kenshin deck and even the purple Kenshin deck to a degree, I think this deck is going to probably struggle a little bit. Because if you're taking too many hits in a turn, before you can get Dorothy and Eden set up, you're going to be you're going to be losing so much life that their effects almost become pointless because you're not getting triggers off the effects or off of the life being hit unless you hit one of the handful of raids or one of your events or fields. Sorry, just events. Field does not have a trigger effect. So it's a cool deck. I think it'd be a fun deck to play, but in terms of an actual competitive environment, I don't know if this deck is really going to hold up. It's interesting for sure, but I think the lack of triggers actually is a detriment to the deck in this case, at least with the speed that our meta's at. In a slower meta, I think this deck could actually be a really interesting pick and could maybe actually come out on top since it is such a if you're only taking a couple damage a turn or even just 1 damage a turn, if you take 1 damage and you have both Eden and the color Dorothy on field, you're getting 2 cards in hand, meaning you're going to have a huge amount of hand advantage to just deal with what your opponent has. So that's this deck. The next one is the one I'm kind of interested in. I don't know how good this deck's really going to be. I have tested this one. I've tested with the purple trigger deck. I've tested with this, and I've tested with the yellow deck that we'll get to here in a minute. Green's the only one I haven't been able to really test with. But this one is a cool deck. This, I basically saw the Gurren and said, hey, there's already stuff set up for it, but I saw the Gurren and said, hey, this is kind of in a way similar to how Mustang works. I wonder if this deck has a chance. And so that's what I've gone for. That was the aim here. So again, we've gone over the Gurren already, so we'll just go over it one more time. You discard up to 3 to make her a double attacker 5,000 that draws every time she attacks. So the idea with this deck is we are trying to basically get enough to we can make Gurren work, and then also use what's often referred to as the Hellbent mechanic. So having 0 cards, or in this case having, in a lot of cases, like 2 or less cards in hand to gain different effects. So to do that, we are running a pretty standard package here. We've got the 0 cost Rapunzel. She is our raid name, our raid target, or one of them. So we want her. She's your get trigger. We have the 0 cost Gurren. This is one that can absolutely be filtered out for something else. This is an active trigger, which is super helpful, but there is no raid target for Gurren here. It's simply just the 0 cost. We have a 3 cost, and then we have the 5/2. So in this case, you're running this more so because it's a 2,000 with active trigger. So this is one if you want to slot something else in, like the The zero cost impact negate, that's not a bad choice. Definitely a slot that we can play with. Then we have the zero cost Modernia. She has the draw trigger, and she is your draw one, trash one. So we already have this, so there's no adding another one of these in to fill in. Kind of like with this one, you could add it in, but you're losing out on your lack of triggers in that deck. From there, we have the two cost Modernia. She is on play, gives something minus 1,000. Small amount, but again, super useful, especially with Purple's color trigger. Purple's color trigger being play a 2 cost or less from your grave or from your trash or sideline, whatever word you want to use. There's so many different ones. Play from your sideline to your front line active, meaning that you can play out this Modernia, and now if you have a 4K blocker, you can block something your opponent has that's 4K because you're able to give it minus 1,000. Super awesome effect, but one that maybe doesn't always come up as much as you might like. But there is synergy here in this particular deck. Next, we have the 3 cost Rapunzel. This is our first of the 2 energy generators. She's your standard draw, or sorry, look at the top 3 and take a trait Pioneer and place the rest on your bottom of your deck. Then discard 1. So your very, very standard search effect. No trigger on her, but that is fine because she is, again, she's a target name or a retarget name. And then she generates 2. So generally, you're going to keep her on the back, and she's going to generate so we can get to 5. Then we have the 3 cost Gurren. This is another active trigger, and active is quite useful in this deck. It will come up. But her effect is during your turn, if you have 2 or less cards in your hand, she gains 1,000. So she's a 3 cost, 4,000 body. That says when attacking, you can pitch a card to give something minus 1,000. So again, putting a lot of your stuff in range to make it so that your opponent has to have unfavorable trades. And that's kind of the goal here is she makes unfavorable trades and is able to really, just be a 4,000. It would simply be 4,000. But the other thing is being able to reduce our hand size because, as you see, her effect is if you have 2 or less, you gain an effect. And that's kind of the theory that we're going with here. Then we have Snow White here. She says, during the main, when in front line, discard 2 cards once per turn, and you can choose a character once on their front line, and it loses. Sorry, choose an opponent's card on their field in general. It loses all its original effects until the start of your next turn. So you can get rid of that card with impact. You can get rid of that card with double attack or damage 2 or whatever effect it is you need to get rid of. You can just snipe it away. Then she says, when attacking, if you have 2 or less cards in your hand, draw up to 1 card. So this is a May effect. You do not have to draw, but you can. And then on top of that, she's the color trigger. This card is absolutely a key card in this deck. If you can stick her and the 5/2 Gurren on field, you are doing well. Because now you're able to pitch 3 cards for Gurren's effect, and then you're able to draw 3 back 2/3. Meaning that now, on your next turn, draw for turn. If you need AAP draw, you can. And so now you're able to have 3 cards available for discard to activate Gurren's effect, 2 cards if you need to use Snow White's effect, or you have 2 cards to actually play with 3 to discard. So definitely super helpful. Being a 4,000 is massive here. The fact that you can just remove an ability, make it so, hey, like you've got... This deck doesn't run impact, so there's no need to remove an impact negate. But say, oh, this something has double blocker or something. I don't want to deal with that, so I'm just going to get rid of it. Whatever you need to. But really, the draw effect here when attacking is really the big thing. At least what I feel is the important part of this card and why I like using it. Then we have our first raid that we'll go over. This is the Modernia raid. We're only running 2 of it. This is my own build, by the way, so I'm still working on it. So we've got some tuning we can still do. But this is the Modernia raid. She says, on play, choose a character opponent's front line. If you do, the chosen character gets minus 3,000 this turn. Then you discard your whole hand. So that's part of why she's at 2. You do want to have a low amount of cards in your hand, but you also don't want to be at 0 cards all the time. There's going to be times where you need to kill something, and you want to raid Modernia to kill it, but you also have cards in your hand you want to keep. And so it is a bit of a tricky card to use because you could potentially screw yourself over by losing out on those cards. So that's why she's only at 2. It does come up, and again, it does have synergy with the 2-cost Modernia. You can play the 2-cost, minus 1,000 something, raid Modernia over top of it to kill that card if it's a 4,000 or less. So, definitely useful, but tricky because you have to discard all cards from your hand. Though the way the Bandai games work, it should generally say, hey, if I have no cards in hand, so if she's my last card I'm playing and I raid into her, I don't have to discard. I'm still going to target a card, give it minus 3,000. There's no cards to discard from your hand because you're already there, but you've already given the minus 3,000. So, definitely a cool card, but a tricky one to use. So, the final character, the final unit that we're going to look over here is the Rapunzel Raid. She is really interesting. She actually gives us major recursion. She says, on play, add up to 1 character card other than Rapunzel from your sideline to your hand. So, hey, you dealt with my Gurren. Gurren's back. Hey, you dealt with my Snow White. She's back. Hey, I need Modernia raid. All right, I've got it. So, Rapunzel is really strong that you can just add something back. Then she says, when attacking, if you have 0 cards in your hand, choose a character in your opponent's front line with 2,000 BP or less and arrest it. So, an effect that comes up maybe not as often because, generally people are going to put bigger stuff up front, but an effect that definitely will come up, especially if you're able to use the Modernia raid effect, the 3-cost Gurren to minus, or the 2-cost Modernia to minus. Definitely has some strong ability or strong synergy there, but really being able to add back any character card except for Rapunzel is huge. Especially with the Gurren. The Gurren is our bread and butter in this deck. She's what you're using to deal with your opponent. From there, we have our standard final. Most decks are going to run a final. We have our special. This one is actually really interesting. You do not require a character on field. You require to have 3 or less cards in your hand. So kill a 3,000, or if you have 3 or less, kill a 5,000. So one that's trickier to use, but you don't need to have a specific character to use it. You can just straight up kill something, even if you have no character. Even if all you have is enough energy to play it, as long as your hand is low, or maybe you have 4 cards, you play this, puts you down to 3, so it now works. So strong, definitely useful, but maybe one that's a little bit harder to use. So it's in some scenarios it doesn't feel as bad to discard because sometimes you just need the discard, right? The last card we have, and one of the cards that's going to help keep us up to date with our hand and keep us in the game, is Pilgrim. So at the end of this turn's attack, so you activate this card, the end of the attack phase that turn, draw 3 cards, then discard 1. So with all of the effects you have here, say you've got a Snow White, a Gurren, and you've used a Pilgrim, you're able to draw 3 cards off of Pilgrim, 2 cards off of Gurren, 1 card off of Snow White. So you're looking at 6 cards in hand, discarding 1, and then drawing for your next turn. So you're able to really kind of keep up in that regard. I think this deck is really interesting. Again, it plays off of that same mindset that you have with Mustang, but instead of it being a control deck that just kills something every turn, instead your idea is you're making Gurren a beat stick and just swinging her at your opponent, forcing them to deal with the fact that she's going to swing twice and just be a menace. One card you can consider putting in. This entirely depends on us getting the promos, which I assume we will because we got them with Yu Yu Hakusho. So it's this 1-cost Rapunzel. So her effect is that when she is discarded from your hand to the sideline, if there's a purple card in your field and you have 2 or less cards in hand, choose 1 trait Pioneer card in your area and activate it. So that means you could play out like a Snow White, play her out, discard the Rapunzel for the effect, for the discard 2 effect, to then untap Snow White, giving you Rush. I haven't put it in the deck right now because we don't know if we're getting the promos, but I'm pretty positive we will. But also, I feel like it's just a little bit too cute. It is a strong effect, and it does come up, but there's a lot of times where you're like, I need to discard something. What do I discard? Well, I don't want to hold on to this because it's not really doing anything. It doesn't have a trigger effect either. So there's times where you're like, I just want to have a card to discard. You end up pitching it, but there's nothing to untap with it. So it becomes kind of a dead card that's being discarded, just like everything else that gets discarded. Um, and on top of that, you cannot add it back with Rapunzel because she is also a Rapunzel. So, again, final thoughts. Deck's cool, deck's interesting. I don't know if it's going to do much. It's fun. It's fun to play. A little tricky to play, but definitely one that maybe in the right, if the stars align, it actually could come out pretty strong. Or if we get a set two, maybe we'll get a set two for Nikke. That'd be pretty cool. Last deck we're going to go over is the deck that I think is going to be the best deck for the Nikke set, which is the yellow counters deck. This build is specifically the one with Modernia. There is another build that is not running Modernia, that's running the second Roppy raid, as well as a couple other things. I think this build is a little bit better. So this deck is similar to how Sisters work for One Punch Man. You're playing events, you're getting effects off of events being played. It's not quite as event heavy as that deck is, but it's still pretty fun. This build is currently, assuming we're getting the promos. This Marion is just really strong. If you have 3 more trait counters on the field, she gains 1,000, so she's 3,000. Decent, but not insane. But on play, look at the top 3 cards of your deck and add a memory or trait counters card to your hand. Put the rest on bottom, discard 1. So the standard search, but it's adding a memory. And you'll see that's going to be a reoccurring thing here. Memory is a very strong card, which we'll get to in a second. So this is running Marion as a 0 cost. Draw 1, trash 1. Awesome. She is a raid target for Modernia. Roppy is our other big raid. And then Anise, we're running her more for the name at this point. We are running 2 Anise raids. And then we've got the 1-drop Roppy. She is going to look at the top 2 of your deck, place any of them to the top, remaining on the bottom. So she's going to scry you 2. No trigger on either of these, but that's okay. We have enough search in the deck. We're generally fine with that. We went over the Marion already, so we've got the 3-cost Marion. Again, no trigger, but she is a 2 energy generator, which, again, like all the other decks we've gone over so far, you want 5 energy to play with. So she's looking at the top 7 and add a memory to your hand, then discard a card, rest on bottom. We've got the 3-cost Anise. She is your 2 energy generator for a second one. She is active and step. Really, honestly, without having like an on play or any like a when attacking effect or anything, she's pretty solid. Step itself is solid, and then she's a 3k body, so decent card overall. And again, a target for Anise. We have our 4-cost Roppy raid. This is kind of one of the major things we're aiming for in this deck. If you have 3 or more trait counters, she gains impact. Like I said, impact is solid. We like to see it. Definitely one that is easy to get in this deck as well. On play, she looks at the top 4 of your deck and add any yellow event card. Then rest on the bottom, discard 1. Feels a bit bad having to discard 1 for a raid, but you are able to just take a special. So you straight up just say, hey, cool, I'm going to search. Oh, hey, I see a special. Cool, play the special, kill something. I think it's completely fair given the fact that you're able to search a special. If they remove that, I think you could maybe remove the discard. And then when attacking, give a trait counters card other than herself 1,000. An effect that's maybe not as important in this deck, but still comes up enough where it will be useful. I mean, again, it makes the 3-cost Anise into a 4K or the Marion, so it's like you can definitely make use of it pretty effectively. Anise, we're only running 2 of this one. She is an impact, negate, and a double blocker. Double blocker is something I feel like is really situational, but it does come up, especially if you have enough active triggers. But otherwise, she's on play, draw 2, discard 2, which in itself is pretty decent. But if you've used any event card during your turn, you draw 3, discard 2 instead. So for any of your Yu-Gi-Oh players, Graceful Charity is banned for a reason. Draw 3, discard 2 is fantastic. Definitely, this is a card I think you can maybe go up on if you need to as well, if you want to. Being a 4K is already solid enough. Impact negate is huge on a big body, as well as double block. It's solid. It really forces your opponent to have to think about how they're going to attack. They can't just swing, swing, swing and hope that they get through. One of the cards that I think makes this deck actually really kind of silly is Neon here. She is our color trigger, 4,000. If you've used an event card this turn, she gains damage 2, and when attacking, draw 1, discard 1. I've already gone over how much I think damage 2 is solid. I think this card alone is really massive in the deck. You are able to pretty consistently use an event card almost every turn. You can also hold if you need to have Neon available or have it available for the Neon effect. So I definitely I think a contender for one of the better cards in the deck. Last character we're going to go over is Modernia. She is a 5-cost raid. On play, add any number of memory from your outside or from your sideline area to your hand. So we'll get to memory right after this. But basically, you're saying I can add up to 4 cards from my sideline to my hand to make use of, and memory is an event, meaning you now have that card available to use to be able to have that whole I've played an event, activate these effects. Then she says when attacking, you can pitch one card. You can target one card on your opponent's front line, pitch a card, target one on your opponent's front line with 1,000 BP or less, and retire it. Or you can pitch any number of event cards from your hand to add 1,000 to that effect. So effectively, she is Mustang in that you are able to just discard cards to kill something. The trade-off is that she does require it to be specifically event cards, but her own on-play effect fills your hand to activate the effect. So very strong, super useful. This is currently running only 3. You could move to 4, but we're mostly trying to run kind of more aggressive and then Modernia to just kill. She is just more removal than anything. Our event cards, we have memory here, so finally go over this card. You can only activate 1 a turn, so it is a hard once per turn, but that is fine because you are able to use the other ones to other effects, such as with Modernia's effect or its own effect. So you draw 2, discard 1, and then if you discarded an event card for the discard, you get to untap an AP, as well as this has an active trigger. So you're able to raid Modernia, add back all your memories to hand, use 1, discard 1 to untap an AP to draw 2, and just dig deeper into your deck if you need to. Or you can just pitch them with Modernia to just kill pretty much anything on the field. I mean, you're only pitching 3 in order to kill a 4,000, or you discard all 4 in order to kill a 5. We have our special. Again, this is very standard. If you'll kill a 3,000. If you have Rappi on field, kill a 5,000. Then we actually are not running a final in this build. The memory kind of fills that slot here. Instead, we're running counters. This is a 3-cost card. You look at the top 5, reveal 2 trait counter cards from among them, add them to your hand, and place any other remaining on the bottom in any order. So being able to look top 5 and add any 2 characters, except for Modernia in this case. She is Heretic, not counters. So you can add any character in your deck except for Modernia, add 2 of them. So, I mean, it's solid. It's also an easy card to pitch for the memory effect or for the Modernia effect. It all kind of just comes together. This deck is really solid. I think it really it has some aggressiveness to it. It's able to just kill stuff with Modernia, and of course your special. Your special is always solid there. Again, damage 2 is its own form of removal. So I mean, we've got a bunch of effects that kind of play well together here and allow us to really do some damage, I think. Of the decks we've gone over, I think this is the one that has a higher chance to actually perform well in a competitive environment. But definitely one that we'll see how it goes as the set releases. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming in and listening to this whole video. If you have any questions, or you want to know a little bit more about some of the decks, or if there's anything else you want to see, please let us know down in the comments. We're happy to go over any of the decks that people are interested in. Definitely something we're looking to see, what people want to see, help us know so we can get that out for you. Otherwise, have a wonderful day and take care. Bye bye.